Good evening, everyone. I am Carrie Goodman, and I am Program and Development Consultant for the Balm and Gilead. And I'm so grateful to be with you all on this evening as we share in this event, HIV on the ballot. Um, or get out and vote, HIV and COVID on the ballot. And I'm so grateful to be moderating this afternoon with Elder George Kerr. And so we want to lift up prayers and our thoughts to our fearless leader, Khadijah Abdullah, who was initially the moderator on this evening with Elder George. And so she asked me to step on in, and so I thought it was the right thing to do on this evening to step in for her as she rests on this evening. And so at this time, I'll let Elder George Kerr introduce himself, and we'll take it further.
Good evening, everyone. I am Elder George Kerr, as Carrie said, and I belong to Westminster Presbyterian Church in Southwest DC, where I serve as the clerk of session. I also co-moderate the Presbyterian HIV Network, Presbyterian Church USA. And so it's a real honor to be here to talk about this extremely important conversation. Carrie and I were just talking a few minutes ago about how the information about get out the vote is actually changing almost every hour. And so it's important for us to have these conversations to be able to educate the community and hear your concerns as well. And so at this time, I would say thank you and turn it back over to Carrie.
Thank you so much, Elder George. And so this evening we have a dynamic panel that shall share with us on with our virtual town hall, Get Out and Vote. And so today we have on our panel Maximilian Boykin. He is the Policy and Organizing Manager at Black AIDS Institute. And also we have Nana Khanna, who is the Executive Director of the Positive Women's Network. And also we have Larry Bryant, who is Community and Engagement Manager for ACLU of the District of Columbia. And lastly, we have Dr. Abdul ElSayed, who is a physician, epidemiologist, progressive activist, educator, author, speaker, and podcast host. And he is also the chair of Southpaw, Michigan, and a political commentator at CNN. And so he'll be joining us a little bit later. So at this time, we'll let our panelists introduce themselves in more detail. And before we move, just to break up the ice a little bit, if everyone could just share one thing that they thought this morning when they woke up. And so we'll start with Nana, and then we'll turn it over to Max, and then close it out with Larry.
Okay, great. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hey, y'all. Great to see everybody here. I'm really excited about this important conversation we're going to have today. So I'm Nana Khanna, she or they, Executive Director of Positive Women's Network USA, and also of Vote Positive USA, which is our affiliated voter engagement organization. I come to this work as a woman living with HIV and also someone who has done a lot of get out the vote work over the years, including running a field operation for a national 501c4 organization focused on organizing progressive young people of color to be involved in electoral politics. And one thing I thought or saw when I woke up this morning, I don't remember what exactly the prompt was, but it was my dog looking really cute, being really lazy this morning, and asking me for pets and cuddles.
Awesome. Next, we'll turn it over to Max.
What's up, good people? Max Boykin with the Black AIDS Institute. He, him, his pronouns. I'm the Policy and Organizing Manager at BAI, and I get to work with our wonderful Black Treatment Advocates Network, which we have 24 chapters and affiliates. And what we're working on, especially during this time of the year, is how do we get out the vote? And what I'll continue to have is a conversation about how in which we're using our advocacy efforts and connecting this get out the vote work to the advocacy efforts and the local work that we're doing around ending the HIV epidemic, and how it also intersects with COVID-19. I have a history of doing work around election work. I I started as an election organizer under the President Obama's campaign in 2012, and continue to think about different ways in which we connect and be able to continue to get more of our folks get out the vote. And then also connecting it to the issues that are most important to them. And like I said, I work for BAI. Reverend Rob Newells, who I know some of the people connected to the Faith and HIV Awareness Day, have worked with him as our new national director. And then, of course, our executive director, Rania Copeland, who continues to lead us through all the different things that we're doing, and understanding that we are moving a Black of the Plan agenda in order to actually end the HIV epidemic. So thank y'all for having me.
Thank you so much, Max. Next, we'll turn it over to Larry Bryant.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Larry Bryant. I use pronouns he, him, his. I'm the Community Engagement Manager with the ACLU of the District of Columbia. In this position, I work with our members, volunteers, district residents on issues including First Amendment rights, criminal justice, racial justice, immigrant rights, LGBTQ equality, disability rights, voting rights, reproductive rights, a lot of different things protecting the civil rights, civil liberties of DC residents. We are one affiliate among many in every state around the country. And like our panelists before me, working hard to ensure that we have the most up-to-date comprehensive voter education information out there, creating paths that allow for people to express their voices at the polls as well as in their town squares, doing it safely, helping to end racial profiling, this current movement we're in around police and law enforcement reform, and of course, ending the HIV and AIDS epidemic and helping to pave the way for access to quality care for everyone who needs it, regardless of where they are living in the country or what their conditions are.
Thank you so much, Larry. And lastly, Dr. Abdul ElSayed.
Hi there. My name is Dr. Abdul ElSayed. I am a physician, epidemiologist, and progressive activist. And most of my work is focused around advocacy for Medicare for all, for access to healthcare and affordable prescription medications for folks, with a focus on addressing racial inequities in health and healthcare, and also focused on helping to get out the vote around these issues. The reality of it is that public health intersects deeply with politics. Veterans of the HIV/AIDS work know this. COVID-19 is showing it to us anew, and really looking forward to a great conversation with my fellow colleagues. Grateful to have the opportunity to be in community with you today.
Thank you so much to our panelists, and I'm going to say our esteemed panelists. So we're just going to jump right on in. And before we move further, those of you who are viewing us on social media, on Facebook or YouTube, if you have any questions, by all means, please put those in the chat box, and we'll make sure that we get to those questions towards the end of our discussion today. And so the first question that I'd like to really just jump right on in, very plain and simple, and anyone can, take the lead on this. Why do you feel that voting is important? Plain and simple. So let's start with Larry.
Voting is important on every level, and it helps. And I feel like, especially as a 53-year-old Black man living in this country, there's a whole lot of people who look and sound like me who have no real faith in the voting process. And that's understandable, especially on the local level, all the way up to the national level. But there is real impact we can make by showing up at the polls, by helping to influence platforms, by helping to influence who our candidates are, and holding accountable their work once elected. Last week, honestly, I felt, I've felt a lot of this lately, really depressed, disoriented with the murder of Jacob Blake, following dozens of murders by the hands of police since George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. These are all issues: police accountability, reforming police, healthcare access, are all connected. And being able to change and improve what that accountability, that oversight looks like. And again, it can be depressing, it can be demoralizing to see what's happening around us seemingly crumble. But I also have faith in us showing up. I have faith in the voices that are out marching, that are out representing the need for change today. Now, that doesn't mean our vote on one day in November is going to change what these outcomes look like the very next day or the very next year. But representing ourselves at the polls helps to change a conversation, helps to move us in a direction where we want to be eventually.
Thank you so much for that. Nana, would you like to respond?
Sure, I'll jump in. And thank you. I think Larry framed it really well. We're in a moment where there is literally so much at stake. This uprising that is coming to address anti-Black violence, anti-Black racism, racialized policing, those are not things that are new, right? But there are particular ways in which white supremacy and lots of other factors like xenophobia and fascism have been very emboldened over the last few years and given lots of different kinds of permission. And so we're in a moment where really, literally everything for our communities is on the line. And elections are not a magic bullet, right? They're not going to solve it. Just like PrEP didn't solve the HIV epidemic, the November 3rd election is not just going to solve everything and it's all going to get better. But elections and electoral power is one tool in our toolbox, and we have to use it. We have to use it right now. We have to always be using it. And I think, folks who have talked about this in certain ways are, think about this as whether you are excited or not excited about candidates at various points on the ballot. And it does matter that we vote all the way down the ballot, by the way, because local elections are some of the main ways we can actually make stuff happen. If you look at the organizing that has been happening in Minneapolis following the murder of George Floyd and some of the impacts in defunding the police or making divestments from police and towards abolition, that is because folks organized around the city council there for many, many years and got their people placed on that city council over many, many years. And so in some ways, when we think about elections, we're thinking about not just like who represents our hopes and dreams, but we're also choosing who's going to be our enemy, who's going to be our target, right? As communities, we're always going to have to organize. We're always going to have to mobilize and hold folks accountable and move them in directions to take care of our people. But this is really about who do we want to be pressuring, next year, not everything isn't just going to magically change. But when we look at what's happening to people living with HIV, with the coronavirus, and we know that the impacts of COVID-19 are disproportionately falling on Black, Latinx, Indigenous communities, the same communities that are affected by HIV, I think we understand that there is a lot at stake and that every single one of our votes really matters.
Thank you. Max, would you like to respond?
Oh, I think Nana and Larry covered it quite great. The things that I would like to add around is, as a person who also works with some of the folks who are definitely frustrated right now, who have been out in the streets, who have been part of the protests, I do completely understand, not feeling like a particular candidate is going to get us to the liberation that many folks want. But I do understand it is a harm reduction tactic in order to get us to where we need to be, in order to push the policies and push the agendas that we want for our communities to be healthier and closer to that point of liberation. I understand the importance of using that tactic. And as a person living in Atlanta who, during our primary season, helped people and gave out water and everything to keep folks in line, because there is a reason that they do not want folks that look like me to be able to be out there and to create the change that we want to see. They don't want to see that frustration actually show up to the polls. And when we're actually making sure that we're supporting one another, and also making sure that we're getting past this illusion of what a candidate is, but understanding this is a person that will be in an elected position that represents us, and then has to be pushed to work for us continuously, is one of the important things for us to think. That November is not a start, but actually, I mean, it's not an end, but it is a start to our continuous advocacy to getting us to where we want to.
Dynamic. So shifting just a little bit, because this is National Faith HIV/AIDS Awareness Day, and so faith is, of course, a major component of this. But of course, we hone in on the social justice matters. How is faith an important element in the context of voting? And I'll let Larry start with that again. I'm not going to pick on you, Larry. I'm not.
That's all right. So I may not be the best person to come to this question because, as Elder George knows, I am not a regular churchgoer. Belong to a church. I'm sorry, Oakland Baptist Church in Alexandria. They will be jumping in my inboxes right now. But honestly, I think, regardless of your faith, regardless of what you believe, regardless of who you follow, what your core belief is around faith, it's about improving the world and community around us. It's about, again, like to what Nana and Max said, about holding our elected officials on the local level, on any level, accountable and being present for that change. As church, we know that particularly in the South, where we've seen voter registration, voter education, all different types of voter engagement activities and opportunities being created, starting at the church, starting in church basements and in the pews, and lifting up those issues that are most important to those faith communities. And with this particular administration, holding some threats to non-Christian faiths, it is important for us as a country as a whole to lift that up, to fight that discrimination against certain faiths, to fight against those kind of criminalizing and damaging words and philosophies coming from that other side. So it's one way to express our freedoms, whether it's religious and otherwise. It's one way to express ourselves, our voices in community, but it's also a way to lift up the places where we are and those issues that are most important to us as church members, as faith members, as faith leaders, and put them right alongside those other platform issues we want to see impacted with our votes.
Definitely. Dr. Abdul?
Yeah, I'm a proud member of the Muslim community here in the United States, and one of the tenets that we believe in, it's actually written in the Quran, and I'll say it in Arabic and then translate it. "I'diluhu aqrabu lit-taqwa," which literally means seek to create justice in the world. That is the closest thing to consciousness of God. And that juxtaposition of justice with consciousness of God is a recognition that we have a deep responsibility to pursue that justice anywhere we see injustice and through every means that we have. And so when you think about a vote, right, the frustrating aspect of our politics, of course, is that you have a binary choice. And sometimes that binary choice doesn't reflect every aspect of everything you may want out of that binary choice. But the question one has to ask themselves is, what is the just choice? How can you seek to address the deep inequities that we see in our society? And particularly given the topic today, the deep inequities in access to basic health and health care, and the ways that those tend to be patterned based on race and socioeconomic position in our society. And so, bringing faith forward is about seeking to create justice in the world in any way that you can. But part of that also, right, and to add on that, the Prophet, peace be upon him, Prophet Muhammad said that if one of you is to see injustice, you should seek to change it with your hands. And if you can't change it with your hands, you should change it with your tongue. And if you can't change it with your tongue, at least you should try and change it in your heart, but understand that that's the least of faith. And when we think about a vote, right, the word for vote in Arabic is actually the word for voice. It's the same word. And I don't think that is a a coincidence, right? And so if you choose to take your voice and set it aside and not use your voice to be fighting for justice, you're missing the point. And so what I find beautiful is the recognition that we need to do this in community together across different faith communities to address the injustices that we find. And so I'm really grateful to be here with you all, but I also know that in this fight, right, the fight against Islamophobia, the fight against anti-Semitism, is the fight against racism. It's the same fight against misogyny. It's the fight against phobia against LGBTQIA Americans. These are the same fights, because the fight on the other end is the fight for justice, and we have to make sure that we use our voice in that respect.
Thank you so much. Nana, would you like to respond from a more of a community aspect in your work that you've done in the past with the faith community?
I mean, what I'll say is just that my own spirituality teaches that every person is divine, and that means that when we see, all of these different forms of oppression and marginalization, particularly targeting certain communities that are very vulnerable right now, including folks who are trans, including folks who are queer, including folks who are Black and brown and Indigenous and Muslim, and the things happening with family separation, things like that. I think it's very clear that as the great Dr. Cornel West says, justice is what love looks like in public, right? If we're going to love each other and create a community that is about love, we have got to address things from the perspective of equity. And so I really believe that as much as anyone uses faith or spirituality to justify division or hatred or fear mongering, they are not interpreting their own faith correctly.
Awesome. Max, would you like to respond?
The only thing so my family's from the South. I was born and mostly raised in Atlanta, and but my parents are from Selma and Montgomery. They grew up during the Civil Rights Movement, understanding what SCLC, what SNCC, what those different members, and rest in peace to my former congressman John Lewis, who faith was a guiding principle to continue to engage into the work that they were doing, and to, as they were saying, to redeem the soul of America during that time. And as we think about what we are doing today, and folks may not have that same connection to church, but many of us have had different connections, either being raised in it, or for me, I came up in my organizing. One of the first things I had to do was go to the churches and the communities and talk about what we were doing, understanding that importance, and understanding and I've heard now from multiple people of different faiths, understand is like, this is something that is bigger than ourselves, and it is all about community. It is all about how in which we engage our community around this. And there has to be, when we are, if it's going out to vote, if it's going out and saying something, like we said, using our voice, it is connected to something that we feel inside ourselves. I have friends who have been going very strong on different protests that we have seen across the country. We have seen folks that are continued to fight against this COVID-19 vaccine. And I see all that is continued in faith, because they do believe that there is something at the end of this, that there's something better to happen. And I think what we have to do is, sometimes folks used to say to us when we used to ask them to go out to vote, oh, I'm going to pray on it. Well, praying ain't going to get us out to the polls. So what we have to do is take that pray into action. And we always challenging folks to make sure that, I think some of the most spiritual folks out there have been the folks that have been on the front lines. I think some of the most spiritual folks have been the folks that are continuing to do this work right now. And it is that faith that keeps them going. And I think the faith is what is going to also carry more and more of our folks to continue to see those change in those elected officials in order to see the change we want to see.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One question to follow in line with that, how can we mobilize those vulnerable or marginalized communities to vote? What are some key strategies that can be implemented?
So, and if there's no problem, I'd like to start this one off.
Go ahead.
I think for us, shout out to some of the folks. I wanted to shout out Jonathan Likes, Slay the Vote, who does it with Keeping Ballroom Community Alive Network, along with Lighthouse. All of that to continue to engage with a ballroom community that has been seen more focus on since polls has come out, but it typically is not engaged in the voting process. But taking the actions in the fun events that they already do and putting that and connecting it to the voting process. So taking the different events that we already see folks doing, historically we've done different things such as street team, but also using where a lot of young folks are on social media, different ways of engagement, making sure that people are registered to vote where they are, and seeing some of the things I've seen from the Movement for Black Lives recently, being able to actually go where folks are at. If folks are on social media, if folks are online, that's where we're going to be. If folks are out in the streets, if they're at a particular protest, or they're even at an event where they're trying to have fun during all what of COVID-19 is, we're still there talking about the importance of going out to vote and making sure that we make this vote not about a singular individual, but we make this about the issues that are actually most important to them. We have to talk to them about those issues, break it down. And then also what we are seeing and what has really been seen about young people, it's not it's not the political parties that are necessarily getting those folks out. It's when folks are coming to them about the issues that are most important to them, that is when folks want to come out to vote. So talking to them about healthcare, talking to them about making sure that they have their access to voting records, and making sure that they have that that we can expel the records or some of their family members' records. Those making sure that they have access to jobs and employment. Those are the things that are most important to people, and actually bringing up the most important issues to them then actually leads them more likely to vote than actually just telling them about one particular party or the other.
Definitely. Larry?
Yeah, I think Max hit it on the head when he says, these methods need to be sometimes taken offline. You have to go where people are. Even here in DC, in the nation's capital, there's like 40% of the population that doesn't have, dedicated access to internet. So how do you reach people who aren't on? They may be connected to social media, but can't access it regularly from their neighborhood. So thinking of ways, and now granted, it's difficult. It's a difficult dance to have, in our organization and plenty of others have had, kind of to rethink what community engagement looks like, what community or organizing looks like, meeting people where they are. You can't just go and meet people at the church or in the park or at the gym after work. You have to kind of be a little more creative with how we define that. But again, like Max said, lifting up those issues that are most impactful for those communities. So whether it's, removing police from schools, whether it's, adapting or raising awareness around surveillance oversight, and how our city government is literally tracking us everywhere we go, or tracking certain of us where we go. Thinking of those kind of issues and how they impact people, and drawing those connections with everyday life, with the reduction of harm through policies, whether it's new policies from city government around housing, around jobs, around schooling, being able to kind of identify those harms, find the voices and the stories of people who are most impacted by those stories, and have them be the ones who are leading the voice for change, leading the voice in our campaigns, leading our voices during council hearings. I mean, we can still make our voices heard a long time before election day comes. So making sure that we're providing these tools, that we're doing our best as an organization, as a network of organizations that are helping to provide those tools that are accessible by those who aren't just a Zoom click away.
Absolutely. And I was actually going to shift the question for Nana a little bit. So since we are in a pandemic, and how do we mobilize where most states have social distancing measures in place? What are some things that can be done?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I think, just connecting the last question you asked to this one, I think we need to never underestimate communities, and communities like desire to participate. And specifically, I'm talking about Black folks, and specifically, I'm talking about immigrant folks and people of color who really do understand what is at stake and often have showed up at the polls despite so many obstacles that have been presented, right? And so I think it is important, though, to understand that there are vested interests that are in power that are really clear that their top priority is basically suppressing the vote from our communities. And so they're going to go to any length necessary to make sure that our people cannot show up. And that looks like lots of different things, especially in a pandemic. It looks like making it hard for people to request an absentee voting application. It looks like making it hard for people to vote by mail. It looks like disinformation about whether you can trust mail-in balloting and mail-in voting. It looks like dismantling the US postal system just to be able to say that ballots didn't arrive. It looks like shutting down polling places in a pandemic. So that people have to travel 5 or 10 or 20 miles to vote, and maybe take multiple buses, and maybe they voted at the same polling place for years, and suddenly it moved, and by the time they made it to their original one, they're not going to be able to turn around and go to a different polling location. So I think that we are up against a lot in this moment. And at the same time, there are so many opportunities. And one of those opportunities is to really participate in mail-in balloting where you can. These laws are changing sometimes by the day or by the week, right? So those who value voter participation and voter turnout in almost every single state and county across the country are organizing to increase access to mail-in voting, which includes not just having to send your ballot in by mail, but getting it early, getting it at your home, being able to fill it out in your own time, and dropping it off at a voting location. That's all part of, potentially mail-in balloting. So I think we can work to keep advocating to make mail-in voting more accessible, make sure that people understand what the opportunities are that are presented by mail-in voting, by early voting. In a pandemic, we are not necessarily encouraging people to go to their polling places on election day. We are encouraging them to engage in harm reduction by trying to vote early, going at times when the polls are not likely to be crowded, to maintain physical distancing while they're voting, to be prepared for potentially long lines where they're standing 6 feet apart and where they might be, the line might go way around the block and it might be cold, it'll be November. We're encouraging folks to be ready for that. Eat your food, take your snacks, bring your water, take your meds, clear your schedule, bring your family with you. Like, nobody should vote alone, right? We should all be voting with our people. We have to show up and organize as a voting bloc. But also, we're going to be working to make sure people can stay in line. So in the runoffs and in the primaries in June in Pennsylvania and in Houston, our people were working to bring snacks to folks. In the past, we've done things like before the pandemic, we've done things like a hot dog stand at the polling place, so folks don't have to leave, right? You don't want there to be any reason for people to have to leave that line before they cast their vote. So I would say, in the context of the pandemic, the number one thing is request your mail-in ballot right now if you have not done that already. Text every single person in your phone and tell them to do the same thing. And number 3, make a plan to vote with your friends. By the way, we also have a lot of information at votepositiveusa.org. If folks want to get involved in organizing the HIV community around the election, we have lots of opportunities for that.
Thank you. And lastly, Dr. Abdul, if you can share, some key strategies that you would implement to mobilize your community.
Well, I've been thinking a lot about this because it's a bit of a hard moment for Muslim Americans. We were thrust very much into the spotlight after 9/11, and since then, I'll be honest with you, it's become harder and harder to be Muslim in America. The spike in Islamophobia and hate crimes against Muslims during Donald Trump's first campaign was pronounced and profound. And at the same time, though, I think our community is deeply starting to come into its own and recognize the power of a political voice. We were really grateful that we had 2 Muslim women elected to Congress, not just one in 2018. And if there's a counterpoint to Donald Trump, it's Representatives Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. And so we're really grateful that we're starting to recognize what our voice and our votes can do. That being said, we watched a DNC convention where Muslim Americans were not featured at all. There were no Arab American or Muslim American speakers at the DNC, and in some respects, it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. However, we recognize that right now there is an existential threat, not just to our existence as American Muslims, but also to democracy as we know it. And a lot of folks in our community don't have to go too far back to have spent some time in countries without functioning democracies. We know what it looks like when democracy doesn't work, when you don't have a voice. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to go to Egypt pretty regularly as a child, and I'd go hang out with my grandmother and my grandfather, my aunts and uncles and cousins. And my grandmother is the wisest person I ever met, but she never got to go to school. And one day she said, you can't say things about politics here. You'll get in trouble. And so the next day, being a bit of an iconoclastic kid, as soon as we went outside, I started using the choice words that my cousins had taught me about the president. And she pulled me inside and she said, "I told you you can't do that." I said, "No, nothing happened." And that night, plainclothes cops came to the house, and my grandfather, I'd never seen him scared in my life. He said, "Where's your passport?" And so I went and got my passport, and he held it up against the cops. He said, "Look, you can't talk to him. He's an American." And I think about what that meant then, and I think about how quickly that's being lost now. And so we've got a lot to fight for. And so, when you think about the core goals that we have to achieve justice in our society, to fight against racism, to fight against misogyny, to fight against homophobia, to fight against transphobia, to fight against inaccess to healthcare, that's an important part of it. But many of us are thinking about our kids, and I have a 2-year-old, and I ask, she was born in the Trump era, and for the rest of her life, she'll have been born in a moment when the president of the United States thought that people who pray like we pray shouldn't be here. And so there's a lot to fight for, our very existence. And we're grateful to have so many people fighting in community with us, because, the things that we hold dear, we all hold dear. And a threat to justice against any of us is a threat to justice against all of us. And that's the conversation that we're having right now. And so we're out there to show that our voice matters, our vote matters, and we're not going to let folks take it away from us.
Absolutely. Elder George?
Yeah, Jesse Brooks has a comment in the chat, and he's basically saying, what do you say to those that feel voting doesn't count, won't make a difference? And I hear this all the time. So who would like to take that question?
So I've heard this a number of times. I think about it and try to really break it down for folks, and especially when they're in a state that they feel is very solidly blue or red, and not feeling like, oh, what does this mean? What does this vote mean? And really, as Nana had said, going down the ballot. Thinking about, that traffic ticket that you got the other day. Letting know about the, about the schools that you're, school superintendent, the kids' schools that your kid's school that you're going to, or that traffic ticket, the judge that you're going to see is someone that is also an elected official. Understanding those pieces, and understanding how especially some of these local elections are so close and why they're important. I try not to say like, this is your duty, this is something but I do want folks to understand that if you don't do this, they're taking away a power from you, a power to actually engage within the system that is and shown us, especially over the last 4 years, how unjust it is, how much it is not here for us, but saying your piece here is to make it more just for you and the people coming after you. And making sure that it's something that is going to help you personally, but also think about those kids that are in your neighborhood if you don't have some that of your own, or think about that community and saying this is going to make it better, not just for you, but also your community to be able to get better.
Absolutely. Nana?
Oh, I think Max said it really well. I think I think it's really important not to kind of like shame or guilt people into participating in the electoral process, but to really hear them and understand what issues are important to them and help them think about, help them connect the dots, kind of as Max was saying. And, you know, one number I often share with folks is the number 537. I don't know if folks know what that number is, but that is the number by which the presidential election swung in the year 2000. 537 votes in Florida decided the 2000 election between Bush and Gore. And it is, you know, that precipitated a whole series of events in terms of like what we've seen happen in the United States today, including some of the things that Dr. ElSayed was mentioning around how the United States has treated Muslims. And so there are many elections that swing by a much smaller number of votes. And folks often don't realize how much their vote really can make a difference. You know, I worked a city council race once where we lost by like 800 votes. So 800 people really understanding that they have the power. If they show up, they do have the power to help allocate resources in their communities, to get those potholes cleaned up, to fund, you know, mental health services in their community, to make sure that arts stays in the schools, things that really matter to them. You know, I think that there's a lot of opportunity there.
Absolutely, absolutely. So shifting just a little bit, what resources can you share to those persons who may be listening to us today to help shape their thoughts on voting, to help with their voting process as well? I'll start with Larry.
So yeah, thanks. Locally, we have different pages on our ACLU DC site that is following the candidates here locally in DC. We conducted with some community partners a candidate forum for four of the council seats that were up or that were open earlier this spring. And we're also doing a sending out to candidates for at-large position in council, similar survey and questions around, for one, police reform and just kind of local city issues, you know, moving forward around government oversight, police accountability, and racial justice in any policies that come from the city government here in DC. But we also have like sites nationally. The Let the People Vote shares state-by-state voting information, not just a day of and leading up to, you know, important dates, but also the Know Your Rights link that also kind of expands on what your rights are in each community, what your options are. And on our national site, we also are listed different platforms across the country in pivotal races that are happening and how people can get involved with that. Very much locally, we have on a People Power site, these are a bunch of different links I'm listing out, where we have like local volunteers who are organizing candidate forums, who are organizing questionnaires and sharing information with other volunteers and potential voters, registered voters in their communities around what the local issues are and how to rally around them, how to put a candidate on record for a particular issue, and using that information to help kind of build your education library and knowing where candidates are on particular issues. So we try to do as much as we can, whether it's just the nuts and bolts of, you know, how to obtain your mail-in ballot, to knowing who the candidates are and being able to speak directly to them if possible. We do here in DC kind of storytelling workshops that help residents and voters kind of craft their own story using lived experience to be able to shape requests or demands from community members on what should be priorities for candidates' platform. So as much as we can to open those doors, provide the tools, and then support the process along the way, the ACLU DC and certainly our affiliates around the country are being there.
Awesome. Nana?
I would say, I'm sorry, the question was about resources. Yeah, thank you. So votepositiveusa.org. You can sign up there to get information and updates. Also on our the Positive Women's Network website, pwn-usa.org, we have a whole election organizing toolkit that you can use. But here's the thing, it's like 63 days till November 3rd. Folks are actually going to start voting sooner, much sooner than that. In many ways, we're saying the election starts in like 30 days. It's actually done in like about 30 days. And that's because folks are going to start receiving their ballots. Voter registration deadlines are happening. Like the universe of people we can reach and talk to and convince about the importance of voting, about how to vote safely, about voting by mail, about the issues we care about, etc. After about 33 days, that universe is dramatically smaller. So the number one thing I would say for anybody who's on here right now, look at your calendar right now. Figure out how many hours a week you can commit to saving democracy, saving the climate, protecting healthcare, taking care of trans folks. Like, what are you actually going to do? We need you. We need you right now. The stakes have literally never been higher. This is the time to commit your hours, whatever you can, and sign up to volunteer. There are paid opportunities. There are lots of organizations you can get involved with, and we can help connect you with those efforts. But the first thing is to really make the commitment to share some of your time, whether it's 2 hours a week that you have or 20 hours a week that you have. We need it all right now.
Yeah, we need you and the person next to you.
Absolutely. Max.
Everything that Nana and Larry said, but also the Black AIDS Institute has a couple partnerships that we're working on to make sure that we get the vote out as much as possible. One is with Headcount. We actually use a QR code on all of our different events and making sure that our VTANs have an option in this. This is a paperless use of being able to make sure that people are registered to vote. And then also, as we get closer, being able to work on the getting out to vote working with. We also are partnering with Vote Tripling and be able to slim down what we used to call on the Obama campaign as the neighborhood team model, in order to make sure that you are using the network that you're engaged with to get as many voters out as possible. As Nana was talking about, texting everyone on your phone, adding a little bit structure into that so we can make sure that we're quadrupling our amounts to get our folks out to vote in order to make sure that we're winning elections. And then lastly, with the Movement for Black Lives, which just had the Black National Convention, talking specifically to issues that are most important to Black people to be able to talk about and get more votes out. I want to shout out some of our leaders, Devin Barrington Ward here in Atlanta. We got some folks down in Florida, Cornelius in Arkansas, different folks. Pat Kelly, who's also a Positive Women Network member in South Carolina, all working to get votes out this year, and being able to make sure that they've been doing a summer fellowship. I know Devin has been doing part of a summer fellowship, leading and getting the Movement for Black Lives, getting these group of young people out to vote, and going in ways in which to engage that. And then going as we get closer, they're launching their fall fellowship to get, again, more folks out to vote, and seeing where these different partnerships, because again, most people aren't one issue people. They're issues on different levels. And if they're hearing from different folks on the different issues that are important to them, to telling them to go out to vote, that is more likely a chance for them to get out to vote. And we want to not just, as everyone has said, get you out to vote, but actually get your friends, your family, and everyone else out to vote, and making that plan to get as much of the community out to vote to make sure that our votes count and are made important this year.
Awesome. And Dr. Abdul?
Yeah, there are just a few things I'll add. Number one, if your vote didn't actually matter, then they wouldn't work so hard to take it away from you. And God knows they work super hard to take it away from you. And so, they say you don't know the value of something until it's gone. And now imagine you had something and there was a systematic effort to try and take it away from you. How tight would you guard it? And how often would you use it? That's how you have to think about your vote. The second point is, they say you are what you eat. When it comes to politics, you are where you fundraise. And one website I just want to direct folks to that I think is really helpful, particularly in smaller races, is opensecrets.com. If you want to know where candidates are getting their money, just go to opensecrets.com, put that candidate's name in, and take a look at where they're getting their money, because where they're getting their money tells you a lot about who they're going to be answerable to if and when they get elected to office. And if you're seeing a whole bunch of corporate political action committee PAC checks there for large amounts of money, you should be very weary of what they say they want to do. And so, people don't bite the hand that feeds them. And so thinking about where that money comes from is really critical. And I just want to add that to all of the incredible points that were made previously.
Awesome. And one thing that I'll definitely lift up, just to, highlight it, to shine a light on it, is definitely making sure we hone into our older adults that may not be connected on social media, that may, be seriously social distancing. We definitely have to make sure we remind ourselves to check on those persons and make sure that they are getting the information that they need, as well as, getting to the polls. I spoke with an older gentleman about a week ago, and his thought process was, I'm not gonna mail in my ballot, because I'm used to going to the polls. And so we have to make sure that we, pay attention to those persons to make sure they're actually doing what they're supposed to do and go where they're supposed to go. Because as Nana said, things are shifting just a little bit. So one polling place that you've been going to for years may not be the place that you may go to this year. And so before we close, I'm not sure if we have any more questions in either of our chat boxes. I'll let our administrator put any questions or comments up at this time. And so as we're waiting a moment, I want each of you to just think, as we wrap it up a little bit, think of what your Twitter speech would be for our persons who are listening. What is that, 150 characters for Twitter? So we'll start with Max. Max has great words to share. So if you were to share something to encourage persons to get out and vote, what would that be?
I didn't think about this one as much, but
I'm working on my draft, so.
No, 2020 has been talked about as the most important election in everyone's lifetime. And I do think it will count as an important shift or correction that the United States will make. For me and people that look like me and people that care about people that look like me, it is most important to vote, because we need to understand that this democracy that has been built off the backs of the people that look like me, that has continuously not been there for the folks who have immigrated to this country, who have built this country. It is important for us to be able to show up and say, hey, we're taking this power back, and you will continue to shift into a way that actually is embodied of the people that made this country great.
Awesome. Larry.
So on our website, it says, no one should have to choose between their right to live, the right to life, and their right to vote. And that, you're talking about so many different things there in this year of 2020, whether it's the right to live as a Black man, surviving through racial, this let's call it what it is, murder by police. COVID, we're seeing historically the health inequities going back even into the HIV and AIDS epidemic. And Black people and people of color were largely, we showed up, we were invited late to the party in regards to, talking about what are some of the life-saving needs and resources that we needed. I weirdly having a conversation with my brother the other day, being born here from DC, being a Black man again, living with HIV for 30 plus years. It's almost ingrained in my soul to see Black and brown people killed, to see Black and brown people destroyed, communities destroyed, systematically just oppressed and disemboweled in some cases. I know I'm using like really like strong language, and that's my intention. And this year, this summer, we're not even in fall yet, has been kind of the, you know, the intersection of all of this hate and turmoil and just those powers. I think Nana listed earlier all the different ways that our governments are, you know, suppressing our votes, are, you know, detaching us from our ability to use our voice. This is where we need to swing back the other way hard in that pendulum swing and fighting for our lives, literally, to not just stay on the ballot, to stay engaged, to stay alive, to stay connected, and making sure that not just for us and the communities around us and the ones that we represent, but for our children and for the people who are coming up after this. You know, to see, I'm trying not to like fall into tears again today, this week already, but to see the young people out on the streets this weekend at the March in Washington, and for the last few months here in DC, speaking on behalf of life and identity, and just wanting to move the needle in that way. It's not going to happen overnight, but damn it, we need the momentum, and then this election day is going to have a huge impact in that momentum. I know that's more than 150.
Yeah, Twitter will they'll shut you down by now. Dr. Abdul.
You know, in 2016, 2016 will always be remembered for one thing, but I hope that in time it'll be remembered for another. It'll probably be remembered as the year that Donald Trump got elected. But I hope that we also remember it as the year that the median child in this country looked a lot more like the people on this panel. And we have to recognize that the way we drive our politics to embrace the existence of all of us, to empower all of us toward that justice that we talked about together, is when we hallow the way for democracy to take its course. And all these folks who are trying to take away your vote, all these folks who are trying to silence you, trying to tell you that nothing you do will change the facts on the ground, it is because they recognize that if and when we come together and we raise our voices for democracy, the world will look so much more equitable and just and sustainable. That work means that not only do we have to show up, but we have to continue forward with a level of empathy, respect, and engagement, and persist in the work of driving democracy forward. And so it's no coincidence that just as voices like ours are becoming powerful in democracy, that there are folks who want to take democracy away. We can't let that happen.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Nana.
Nobody is coming to save us. We got to do this ourselves, you know, and as I think the great poet June Jordan and some other folks have said, we are the ones we've been waiting for. We don't get a redo after November 3rd. That there's not another chance. This is our chance. You know, things are already sliding precipitously down into, we're seeing the undermining of like all of these different public institutions. Everything is being decimated. People's rights are being taken away. People's health is being taken away. People's lives, like especially for Black folks, brown folks, are literally being stolen for no reason. And if this COVID-19 pandemic has not shown us anything, it should be that the power lies in our communities. It is not some political leader that is going to, it is the current existing political leadership that is going to save us. We have some work to do here, and there's no community that actually has the track record of organizing in the face of this kind of oppression in the way that the HIV community does. So we already know how to do this, y'all. We just have to do it. We have to get really serious about doing it, and we have to win. There's just too much at stake to play any games right now. All hands on deck. 33 days.
There you go.
Well, thank you so much to our panel. Want to thank you all for tuning in to this evening's town hall. Get out and vote. HIV and COVID on the ballot. We pray that each and every person will, exercise their right to vote. And also, as we've been sharing, make sure you bring others with you. We also want to give kudos to Khadija Abdullah for her fearless leadership in the organizing of this National Faith HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. Thank you so much, Khadija. And this actually concludes our this year's 2020 National Faith HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. This was our final event, and we want to thank each and every person for joining us for each event that we've had over the last 4 days. Coming up in the next few days, we will have the International Faith Conference, Resilience and Renewal. That conference will take place on September the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. The information is on your screen. You can register there at interfaith/health-platform.org/HIV-conference-2020. So we hope that you'll join us for that dynamic time of gathering. And then also monthly, we've been doing our HIV and Faith and Resilience and Renewal. In September, on September the 30th, Wednesday, September the 30th, we'll have HIV in the Latinx community. That will be Wednesday, September the 30th, 2020 at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And this will be a conversation on the legacy of faith and HIV. We want to thank our sponsors for this year's National Faith HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. Thank you so much. And also thank you to our steering committee for organizing such a dynamic weekend of events. Again, thank you to our panelists, and this concludes our event. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank all of you.
Thank you all. Take good care.
Have a good one.